second, you're not in any trouble, and then 5 minutes later you're being drugged to the car in handcuffs. That's not the way it should be. As far as tough on crime simply to me means being an effective leader, an effective law enforcement officer, where you treat each individual situation as an individual situation, each individual as an individual. You don't stereotype one individual and just because of the way he or she looks or appears or is dressed that evening leads you to act differently than you would if someone was dressed differently or looks differently. And those kind of things need to go away. The change starts on the street, and obviously if you approach somebody with a smile and respect and a courteous demeanor, then that keeps you from de-escalating the situation, and it will definitely help for officer safety. I mean, at the end of the day, the most important thing is that everyone goes home. Not just the officer goes home to his family, but the citizens that he deals with should be able to go home with their families also. The last thing that I would say is that you've heard some things about what's being said about constables and training and stuff like that. So because that's been brought up, I'll hit on that. The constables are all right. So as far as in respect to my deputies, my chief deputy was trained about the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office. He's retired from the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office. Most of my other deputies either went through SPD Academy or Caddo Parish Sheriff's Academy. They were all trained by the same people. The reason that came up is because it was brought to light that the current sheriff has made a list of 331 deputies that may be insurance salesmen or drug reps or whatever they are. And these deputies bought for $500, they bought this. They bought a badge, a wallet, and a commission. And that commission says that they're a law enforcement officer. They have that same power to do the exact same thing that I do. So we sold these commissions for $500 a piece. Some of these individuals advised they paid $1,500. They bought 3 of them. So these individuals, if they're stopped, and a law enforcement officer stops them anywhere, and they say, hey, this is what I got, they're not getting a ticket. They're probably not going to jail. And that $500 a piece bought them that ticket. Now, does anybody in this room have a badge or a commission? No. Now, the other thing, do any of you own businesses?
Yes.
All right, so if you own a business and let's say you're selling cell phone, or you want to open up a cell phone business in Caddo Parish, when you open up that business to sell cell phones, you've got people everywhere selling cell phones. It's hard to make a living doing that. But if you had a business where you said, listen, you come on in and give me $500, I can sell you one of these. This gives you law, this gives you power, it gives you prestige, and it gives you what you always wanted. How many of those could you sell? You make a killing.
Yeah.
So it's those kind of things are the things that need to stop. We need to realize that we are not self-serving, but a servant to the public, and that you need to have access to your sheriff. I mean, if everybody here has always had full access to your sheriff, and you've never had any problem, your family's never been arrested or had any problems or anything that you felt that you were dealt with unfairly or unjustly, then it's great. But if you have, then you need to change. And that's what I want to do. I'm running for sheriff. I'm running so that you don't have to. Okay. So if you have any questions, I'm ready.
Right, that's good with a big hand. All right, we're going to get the questions.
I'm glad that you came out. And let's get to the last thing that you were just bringing out, because the case up in Tulsa, Oklahoma is directly related to what you just got to talking about. So you're telling me that here in Caddo Parish, how many of those types of entities are connected with the Sheriff's Department?
I have a list of 331 people that purchased. I have a list of 331 Caucasian individuals that purchased badges, commissions, and wallets, and they paid $500 a piece for it. And all that money went into the Sheriff's campaign account.
Wow. And that is a lifetime situation?
It's a commission that lasts throughout the tenure of the sheriff. So I mean,
okay.
He's no longer the sheriff.
So the only way to get rid of that is to replace the sheriff.
That's absolutely correct.
Eric, as you have seen, and I'm quite sure you watched the news over the past week or so in Baltimore and the past year in Ferguson, though you are just a constable in a smaller law enforcement capacity, what's your overall take on law enforcement, policing in the black community especially, but the dynamics of law enforcement and policing entities that do not look like most of the law enforcement personnel that you may have on your staff?
As far as Oklahoma, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
As far as Oklahoma, that was the guy in Oklahoma. It's my understanding that he was an honorary sheriff, so he didn't. I mean, he was either an honorary or a reserve. Either way, he was not a full-time law enforcement officer. He did have an honorary commission to the sheriff's office, and that gets back to the training. I mean, I think the training should be. We should have full access to all the same training that everyone else does, but I think within that training shouldn't be simply tactical things. I think it should be interaction. I think we should teach more training that would help us to better interact with the people, with all the people. And I think that we should use events like Ferguson and Oklahoma and those things to use those as a basis for our training and have people that aren't just law enforcement, but maybe counselors or people that can come in and say, listen, this is how you avoid this issue. This is how you treat someone with compassion and you do things differently than what's been done, because obviously what we're doing now isn't working. And we're no different than Ferguson or any other community. We're one event away from it. And I think that it's imperative now that someone gets in here and makes a change. One way to make that change is to interact with your people, not just your core group of people that give you contributions, not just that group. I think that it's important that you get with your community leaders, black preachers, white preachers, Hispanics, and you meet with them not just in election season, not where it's election season, it's like Christmas. You can get them in and get anything you want. I think that throughout your entire term as sheriff or any other elected official, you need to give the public full access. You are the servant for the public. So what I would do differently is I would have at least monthly meetings with, let's say you go to a church in West Shreveport and you have all the preachers and ministers. The preachers have direct access to the largest majority in their districts. And so I think that you meet with these preachers. These ministers come forward and you have a Q&A session where they say, listen, Sheriff, this is what we've got in our congregation. We've got a couple individuals that have been in trouble and we don't understand. This is what we need to be changed. This is something that's going on in a neighborhood in my district. And then the sheriff goes back and he can delegate that to the proper deputies, the proper department, and you work with that district. And then you go to South Shreveport, and then you go to North Shreveport, you do the same thing. So you have community leaders, and you use these leaders to your benefit. That way you can deal one-on-one with the public without having to go out and touch 300,000 people. You do it through your ministers, preachers, and community leaders.
I'm going to with a statement that I've learned from my distinguished colleague, Mr. Lester, and when he asked you a question, he got a statement for you. But my question was, as we looked at Baltimore and it was representative of a cross-section of America, many people have said that Baltimore was a racial problem. But as we witnessed the platform, we noticed that everyone who was in a position of authority, from the mayor to the police commissioner, big representative of a cross-section of America, to the senator, to the congressman, even to the presidency of the United States, were of African-American descent. So how could you conclude that the problem that we were facing, those that were making the decision, those that were in the position of authority, were all of African-American descent? So how could we conclude that the problem was a problem of a racial America? But my question to you was this: I may have fallen into a state of vague nebulism or neurological dysfunction. You stated that you gave everybody a 20-minute rule. So my question was, first question, was that a racial problem? My second question was, would you implement these same policies or these same principles if you became sheriff of Caddo Parish?
Yes, I think, like I said before, it's very important that every single citizen, regardless of your age, gender, ethnicity, gets treated the same way. And that's where we need training. We need training to where these officers realize that every single person is an individual, and they cannot be judged. And a lot of times we judge people because of our upbringing or how we were influenced growing up. And those things that's what we've got to do. We've got to change that. Change the way we see it.
check.
Yeah.
No, is that his mic?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that you?
Can you hear me? No.
Test.
Oh,
No, that's okay. No, welcome. I just think that change has to start with one. And somebody has to start it. Everybody's not going to get on the same, got to get in the same boat at the same time and do it. So somebody has to step up and go against the grain and make the changes necessary that are needed and required for public safety and officer safety. And so that's essentially what I was saying. I'll check. Talk and see if I can hear you in here.
okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you
No,
anyway.
but I'll talk loud.
Okay.
The gentleman said, and I hear on Fox News said that the Afro-Americans control Baltimore. We know better than that. Because if they control Baltimore, a lot of money would have been going into Baltimore. The people that control Baltimore are your well-established white-collar people. And they said they spent $1 billion in that stimulus package. Now, the trickle-down effect, the money never got down to Baltimore. Because if they had put $1 billion in Baltimore, they wouldn't have had all the damn board of them houses. They would have employed people like crazy. The money comes down, they take off the money off the top for administration fees, and then it gets down to us to $400-500. And that's it. So we've been tricked in believing that. We are going to have to do something for ourselves as black folks and quit depending on white folks to come rescue. They ain't riding in on no white horse to save us. So what I'm saying is everybody said, well, we put $22 trillion in money for blacks over 30-year period, and still the Democrats didn't do anything. Yeah, they may have put that money in there, but hell, we wasn't in charge of the money. The money went to white-collar people to control the money. And we believe that Fox Bull, that O'Reilly and Hannity talk about, now when this black woman decided that she would file a suit, charging people, now all of a sudden everybody on TV says she can't get a conviction. All we wanted to do in Ferguson was file a charge against and then go to court and win or lose. But the DA down there decided that he was not going to wait the good old boy network. Now, what you're saying plays well at the Tuesday morning breakfast. But that bull ain't going to tell to the white community because they make billions of dollars off of us, keeping us Negroes in line. Because look at the eggs that they sell, look at the coffee they sell, look at the bacon they sell, the loaf of bread they sell. Then he keep, if you look at his truck, his trucking stuff in there for food and the toilet tissue and all that stuff. And you think you gonna stand in line and stop this money from flowing into the white community? They'll run over you like a bug of I-49. So I'm gonna pray for you, because you ain't gonna be able to stop this. How many deputies do they have?
As a compound, one chief.
No, I'm saying how many deputies?
The sheriff's office?
Yes.
Around, let's say 500 for a round number.
Look at all them salaries. Look at all those uniforms and all the guns and ammunition that these people are selling to the sheriff department and the paper clips and the fax machine. Do you think they gonna put him in there to stop that? You got to be crazy.
I think he's optimistic enough to basically want to run. Let me ask this, Eric, from an overall law enforcement standpoint, because what my conversation has been in the black community is, and you just hit on something, and Anderson Cooper talked about it last night on his show, implicit bias. Not the explicit bias, but the implicit, that which dwells in all people. And they referenced the 1940s children, I'm talking about small children, all, including black children, when asked the question, which dog is evil, the black dog was selected. Which dog was dumb, the black dog was selected. Which dog was good, the white dogs. So, and then that test was done over. CNN commissioned this just a few years back. Same result. And we're talking about 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, children, where their parents are not teaching them, to hate, black folks, but it's already embedded. So they were making a correlation how those children end up becoming older, and they still have this implicit bias. And they were talking about how this plays into, those entities that are law enforcement individuals. I myself know directly of this because the Caucasian police officer that was killed a few years ago by the captain's son, Timothy Puny, he and I grew up together in Queensborough. So I know of his racial bias because he grew up right across the street from me, both of the twins, and both of them became police officers. So I can speak directly to this because neither one had gone through any cultural sensitivity training or cultural diversity training, but they became law enforcement personnel. So my question to you is, if you were elected, would you focus on those types of things in terms of cultural diversity training, cultural sensitivity training for your deputies?
Most definitely. We are in great need for cultural diversity training completely. And I think that part of the solution is like I said before, is getting with community leaders, and not just white community leaders, and not just black community leaders, but all community leaders. The other thing is to maintain diversity within your department. So, and start with the very top. It should be diverse from the very top to the very bottom. And so because there are equally qualified individuals in Caddo Parish that can work at 505 Travis Street and upper administration of the Sheriff's Office, just as well as there are those that can work at the jail. And I think that there needs to be that. If there are going to be 10 captains in administration, then 5 need to be African American and 5 need to be Caucasian. And by doing this, you're setting a precedent, you're setting an example. And so then the public perception is key. Because the public perception, let's say you have 10 African Americans that are 10 Caucasians, the public perception is going to be, hey, he's got 10 Caucasian individuals or 10 African American individuals in there, and it's going to be negative from the get-go. So if you can immediately get in there and change that, it starts from the top, and then it has to trickle down to all the deputies. And they also, and deputies, you have great deputies that work at the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office, and I think they would welcome cultural diversity training. Some will, some won't. Regardless, we all need it. Everyone needs it. And you can see throughout the entire United States with significant events that are constantly continuing to occur, and they're not stopping. That trend is not over. That trend has just started. And so I think it starts. So as the sheriff, I can't control all the money in the parish or anything like that. I don't want to control anything. I just want to be a leader that can set an example for a department, and in hopes that the majority of those people that work for me and with me will follow that lead and interact with the community and try to make Caddo Parish a better and safer place where we can all get along, where it's not a lot of button heads. And you need, another important thing is you need to get along and have a relationship with every single agency. If one person, I'm not going to use someone to single anybody out. Let's just say if one individual, one community leader doesn't see things the way you do, you don't start a political corruption investigation against this individual just because he sees things differently. If an African American contractor goes out and does something and it wasn't a crime when he did it, I think we all know what I'm talking about. It wasn't a crime when he did it. The district attorney said, hey, it wasn't a crime when he did it. And then the sheriff comes back and says, listen, just arrest him for something, just get him on anything. Well, that's what we need to get away from. Those things should stop. If it's not a crime, it's not a crime. Move on to things that are more important and of greater significance to public safety in our community. And we need to just stop. We definitely need to change the way things are going like that.
So if you would be in favor of cultural diversity training?
Absolutely, 100%.
Just one simple question. With all that is going on, most people can't see it, but it does exist. Everybody in this room is aware of the soon die out. But there's a cultural racism that most people don't see. And it's got something to do with big business, how money can influence people. And it don't have anything to do with black or white. It has something to do with your status, who you are, where you live. I mean, you just made a perfect example of it. You know, these guys getting badges based upon, you know, who they are and how they contribute money. So that's the new form of racism that seems to be existing now. But my question to you is if the Lord permits it, and I say it sincerely, and it's in you, if the Lord permits it, you wind up becoming sheriff. I heard you say that you want to be diverse in every, you know, trying to reach out, and that's a beautiful thing. That's needful. But reach out to the whole community and involve everyone, not just on election time. But my question to you is this, is that with all that is going on now, when you get elected, what would be your primary, the first thing on your agenda that you would decide that you want to do in order to bring this relationship between law enforcement and the community, to rebuild on that relationship? Because we tell the community, I'm a pastor, we tell the community, okay, be involved with the police. But now we're seeing on television that the police will not tell on other police officers because there's a code there where I can't tell on you and you don't tell on me because we work together. But we ask these citizens to say, look here, we want you to tell us what such and such is doing, and we want you to be involved. But we are not going to, what they call on the street snitching, we are not going to snitch, and I hate to use that word, or we're not going to tell on our law enforcement when they break the rules. How would you speak to that component of your officers when you become mayor?
Law enforcement.
I mean, when you become sheriff.
Law enforcement officers should be held to the exact same standards as every other citizen. We should, and as I've said several times today, is that we're public servants, and we can. And the other thing is, as a deputy, you can lose that job just as quick as you got it. And so, if there is an officer out there that is not sensitive to cultural diversity and creates a pattern, which is more than once, and then that officer's called in and receives cultural diversity training or whatever needs to happen, and that officer can't do that, then obviously we have to replace that officer. I mean, you can't. We have. It's going to take some significant event. It's going to take some going against the grain to change the status quo, and that's what I'm prepared to do. I want that. We need that. I'm from here. I was born here. I want to continue to live here, and the only way to make those changes is to not go with the current flow. I can't sit here and sell badges. I can't sit here and try to continue to please one sector of the community while the rest of the community is getting burned and treated differently. We all need to be treated the exact same way, and that's not something that can happen overnight. You start that with your administration, and you meet with your administration. You meet with your captains. You meet with your lieutenants, and you meet with your sergeants, and you tell each of these captains, lieutenants, and sergeants, listen, you get with your deputies, and you tell them this is the change. This is what's going to happen. We're going to be more compassionate. We're going to listen. Before we jump out and start talking and be an accusation, we're going to listen. We're going to make sure we're in the right place at the right time, and we're talking to the right individual. And we're going to make sure that the events that transpire on that traffic stop or at that house or that investigation are the same, are handled the same way that we would want them handled if we were on the other end of that. And so you put yourself in their shoes, and that's part of the cultural diversity training, is that we put ourselves in the shoes and in the position of those on the other end. And it's got to start there. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's not something that anybody can come in on a white horse and say today. It's not going to happen. But it's got to start somewhere.
Right. And can I just say this, just a quick follow-up. Just recently, something just happened to me just recently. I called a police officer out to one of my rental properties. And as soon as the police got in the car, I'm already introducing myself because I know the tension and what's going on. And as soon as I got in the car, I said, how are you doing? I'm Pastor Mays. And the first thing this officer did, I said, I'm the one who called you. I mean, see them removed. Well, back up one minute. I'm like, ma'am, kill that, please. But most people don't know because we're not, a lot of people are not. So I went on and applied. I said, when you get through saying bag up, I am the homeowner of this particular property, and this is a rental property, and there's a person here that should not be here. And I said, the only reason I called you out here for you to go in with me to see what damage has been done to this property, so that you can do an initial report. That's what I called you for.
Typically, the general public doesn't see this until there's a significant event, and that's unfortunate, and that's exactly what's going on. These things are happening, but people are scared to snitch or say anything because they're afraid of the backlash.
That's it.
And that's what needs to go away. That's why you need to bring this to the department. You need to be able to call someone in administration. That's what they're there for. They work for you. Your tax dollars pay for every single one of them. And so you need to have full and direct access, and especially as a pastor, you represent your congregation. You need to have that access and say, hey, this is what happened to me. I mean, and I'll give you one example. I won't say where or name any names, but there's an incident that happened in Southeast Shreveport where an individual walked into an affluent person's home, and this individual was disoriented and not 100% sure he even knew where he was going. Walks in, realizes he's in the wrong place, and he walks out. Well, the people wanted to pursue charges, so I went and talked to the individual and pursued the charges. Well, I got a phone call from the sheriff about 10 or 11 o'clock that night, and the sheriff said, listen, and this happened in the city limits, not outside in the parish, in the city limits where Shreveport police are normally patrol. And the sheriff called me and said, listen, he said, anytime somebody walks into someone's house in a gated subdivision in Southeast Shreveport, I need to be notified. And I said, well, what would you, that's Shreveport Police's job, that's their jurisdiction, what would you do differently? He goes, well, if someone walks into a home in a gated subdivision, a prominent community, I need to be notified. And I said, well, what would you do about it? He said, well, I'd have armed guards stand outside their house, that person was brought to justice. And I said, well, listen, that's wonderful because last night and earlier this week, that happened in Cedar Grove, Morningsport, Lakeside, Shreveport. People, they did drive-bys, they broke into homes. So I need to let all those individuals know that just because they live in the city doesn't mean you're not going to send armed guards to their house also. And his response was, you know what I mean? And I said, yes, sir, I understand exactly what you mean. What happens if it goes on behind gates of affluent contributors? That's where it is. That's what needs to change. And that's what we can't. That's what needs to be done away with.
That's it.
Question. Everybody has to live with a grade at some time. As far as the Caddo Sheriff's Office and the Shreveport Police Department, if you give them a grade from 1 to 10, 10 being excellent, how effective are they in their mission? And how racially diverse training effective are they in their mission? Each of them.
I don't think I have the background to properly assess that. I think that would take a lot of. I don't have.
Well, if you gave them a general grade, obviously you're putting yourself out to do a better job. How would you grade them?
I couldn't. I couldn't grade the officers. I don't mean that's just.
No, as a department.
Right, as a department. Well, I think that's comparable. The only way you can do that is compare them to another department that's doing something differently. I can't give them a grade without comparing them to something else, without comparing them to another department.
Well, a standard of effectiveness and diversity.
I think that we all need cultural diversity training, and I think that if we did that, then it would definitely improve both departments. Definitely.
They don't get it now?
Not that I'm aware of. There may be that may be a small portion of the academy, but not that I haven't seen it.
Okay, let's say if you became sheriff, on procedures, it seems that the procedures are messed up with the officers following procedures. I'm giving you a few illustrations because I've seen officers, whether they sheriffs, police, or state troopers, they don't follow procedures. And I'll give you a couple of examples because I've seen this with my own eyes. I've seen state troopers downtown waiting till the minority blacks come out of the casinos because they know they drink is free. And then they harass them, they give them tickets. I've seen police sit there and monitor different bars that most of the blacks come out, just to give them tickets. And I'm saying this on behalf because one of my friend ladies, she just came out the bar, got in her car, stopped to tell one of her friends by, and there was a police right there on her immediately. Now, what I mean by procedures, this police, I'm sitting in there, this police asked her for her license, but he never asked her about registration, insurance. Now, I don't know whether these police is monitored with the state troopers or not, but I told her, I said, well, I'll follow you to make sure that they don't pursue you. And if I didn't get behind her, this state trooper was giving the black guy a ticket. The other state trooper was set. He spotted her car because somehow the police had ran her license. And this state trooper jumped and followed her. Now, I was going to cut off at I-49 and she was going to go on I-20. So when I seen him coming, I didn't cut off. I jumped back to follow her. Now, he seen me following her and he was going to stop her. But when he seen me, then he zips off and catch Clear Avenue and go away. Why isn't the sheriff department, any other department, checking to see if there are law enforcement? They need more drug random checking. Because there are police, it doesn't mean they're not on drugs. You can be a doctor, you can still be on drugs. But drugs seem to be an advocate to any human that's on it. And that's causing racketeering with the different law enforcement. Because I'm just going to say this, without law, everybody becomes a target demon. So if it doesn't get stopped, it's going to escalate into riots if the officers are not doing their business.
Good morning. One thing is, Caddo Parish Sheriff, they have authority over Caddo Parish, right?
Correct, yes, sir.
And from Solar Parish line, south to Ida, Louisiana, north, east is Greenwood, west, Boulder City.
East.
East goes to west is correct.
Yeah, we got you.
I got you completely.
Well, my thing is, I know going south, they have a station or substation. Then going north, they have one in the building. And they have one, you know what, substation.
They have a substation that's heading north off on the left, if there's going toward Vivian. They've got one in South Shreveport, and there's 4910, which is basically the maintenance facility, but there are people there at certain hours. And then you have 505 Drive Street in the courthouse, but other than that, I don't know of any of the substations.
And they have one down on the Red River now.
Right, and the new one on the boat launch.
Okay, what I'm saying, I think the sheriff department supersedes the city bus. The sheriff department come in to the city and do certain things. That's what I'm saying. My thing is, I didn't see the growth. Is anyone they can get a substation? Or that's the city's?
That's the city. It's the Shreveport Police Department. And Shreveport Police Department has, their response time is basically fantastic inside the city. And I think it's a minute and a half, something like that. It's pretty quick. And then they're very effective in the city. And so the sheriff's office primarily focuses on everything outside of Ward 4, which is inside the city. So Item, Orange, Odessa, Vivian, Greenwood, Keithville, those areas. And so that's why there's a substation at the south end. That's kind of a hub for those deputies that serve the south end. And the north end, Vivian, or between Caddo and the northern part of Caddo, that substation serves that end. It's a place for deputies for a hub. And there's still all dispatch to Caddo 911, but it's just basically a hub.
Yeah, definitely. The sheriff department most take care of the parish, right?
Correct, yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm a detail, and I like to know, find out why if you become elected sheriff. Things that I have seen, and things that I know for a fact, what happened. Like at the bus station, police, down at the bus station, police comes on the ground. Not one day, not 2 days, every day. If you come, let's say, how would you prevent stopping all this?
Well, I wouldn't have any way of stopping that. Those things you're talking about occurred inside the city limits. So we wouldn't have anything to do with the bus station or anything inside the city. We primarily focus on matters that happen outside the parish, where there's not any bus stations and not a lot of parks. But obviously, if those events occur within the parish and outside of the Ward 4, then we would address them. It would be something that we would address them and treat them as if it was our own, as if it were our own children. I have 3 children, so obviously, I wouldn't want it happening to my kids. So if I wouldn't want it happening to myself, my family, or my children, I don't want it happening to yourself, your family, or your children. And if it did happen, I would look at the same actions be taken against the individual that did it as if I would if they had my own children.
And Eric, I think the last 2 questions pretty much serve the basis for the question. A lot of people really don't understand those are police and the sheriff here. So they don't really, they just see
They see law enforcement.
That's right. That's the same. What will you do to enlighten the citizens as it relates to what you all do? Because your primary deal is overseeing CCC, the reentry program. Talk about how you will brand, if you're elected, the sheriff department to enlighten citizens as it relates to the functions of the sheriff department.
And that's very important, because I think that if a lot of the citizens are unknowing when it comes to they're uninformed as to actually what exactly the police officer can and cannot do, because what they see is the interaction that they have with their family or their neighborhood. They don't see the day-to-day operations. So I think that we should have some community forums where and then those community forums should go on a regular basis. And you don't get up here, the sheriff, the deputies shouldn't get up here and speak and tell everything they know. They should listen to the questions and the concerns of the citizens, and then they can give their proper response, or not a proper response, but a correct response, and tell the citizens and inform them as to what goes on. People need to know what goes on in jail, how it works. And I think that if a lot of the youth understood that what went on from the point you're arrested to the booking process, and they saw this or understood it, a lot of them may change their ways, and that's in every community. If they had a full and better understanding as to what we do and what should be done, then they'd understand whether it was done correctly or incorrectly. And you just need public awareness. We all need to communicate, and it goes back to what I said earlier. We all need to meet and understand one another, and I think that it starts with the churches and the communities, and it has to happen in each individual community. You're not ever going to get every single citizen, every single community in one big room in the Hearst Coliseum, so you can stand there and talk to all of them. There's no way, that's ineffective. And so it needs to start on a small level. And when that brings us to the constables, there's 10 constables here, and 10 constables throughout Caddo Parish. So each individual constable, they know most of their constituents. And so the constables are a voice and an ear for the people in their communities. And that's another thing that the sheriff could utilize. The sheriff has 10 constables out there, and the way it's done up until recently is that the constables are your eyes and ears out into the rural areas of the parish. And that way, but when you go against that and no one communicates, no one gets along, it's ineffective and it won't work.
Since you are even elected as constable, do you actually manage a budget, or is your budget?
We don't get tax dollars.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So how do you all function?
We can get grant money, we can get private funding, and that's it. We don't get we get none of your tax dollars.
Wow. So with your particular department, tell me about your budget and.
So I'm not in it for the money. How about that?
Yeah, I know. Trust me. You just enlightened me right there.
And I get phone calls. I mean, all throughout the middle of the night. My deputies get phone calls all throughout the night, and we go drug stuff. We work a lot of theft, and we do a lot. And we answer them. They have our cell phone numbers, and there's people.
Wow.
And my ward goes from Redwood Parish and DeSoto Parish south, north to Kings Highway, east over to Bossier, and west basically to I-49. And so these constituents, they call us on a regular basis all day long, and we don't get big fat salaries. We don't get any of that. So our money comes from private funding, and then
wow. So
I'm not in this for the money.
Oh no, I got you. And see, I think this is a good enlightenment for everybody. what would you say, how long have you been constable, first of all?
I'm in my second, they're 6-year terms, and then my second 6-year term.
So you're
And I was a deputy before that, and then I worked as a court-appointed special advocate before
So
that.
you had a good opportunity to establish, an oversee budget. So over your first term, now in your second, what was your initial budget for your first term, and where you at now? What do y'all pretty much average?
We don't have a budget, how about that? We don't, I mean, it's strictly, our vehicles can come from other departments, they're donated from other departments, or we can get them through a state bid, and that's it. But the only money that we get is when if we serve papers for the justice of the peace, or through seizures. And that's it. So we don't have an active budget. I mean, we don't have that kind of money. It's not that kind of funding. And like I said, I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking to do something to give back to the community.
So you have really been in law enforcement for the philosophical construct of serve and protect.
Exactly. I want to make a difference. That's it. I want to make a difference. And then when it gets to a point, whether it's 4 years or 8 years or whatever it is, to where I'm no longer effective and I'm no longer making a difference, or I think that someone else can do a better job, then I'll walk away.
Tell me about your background growing up and what led you into wanting to get into the initial aspect.
I grew up in West Shreveport, over off Thompson Road, off Baltimore Pines Road. My dad retired from KCS Railroad after 40 years. He just retired a few years ago. So my mom drove a bus, and then she went on to work at Wilson Knight Hospital as just doing working for doctors. So I didn't come from a wealthy family. My dad worked at KCS Railroad, and that's a very culture diverse community out there. So we never saw. I guess I was sheltered. We didn't know, there were no racial slurs used in our home. Our friends didn't use them, and we were always in that community with the railroad and the people that worked. My dad just worked in the diesel shop. He was just a mechanic in the diesel shop, and so his friends were our friends, and his friends' kids were ours, and they were both black and white. So we didn't see. So I was somewhat sheltered when it comes to that. I didn't see it. No one used the N-word in our home, and none of my family members did, and so we were just, that's just the way it was. And growing up, I guess as I got older, I never saw a drug. No one ever offered me drugs, not in high school anywhere. I didn't see a drug until I started as a court-appointed special advocate and as a deputy. It was the first time I ever even saw marijuana. I mean, I never tried it, I never saw it, but I started seeing the things that were happening in the way that people got addicted to these things, and it led them to do crimes, and then once they got addicted, it led them to do things they wouldn't normally do, and it impaired their judgment. And I think that there are a lot of programs that we put into place that can help these people, rather than throw them on the ground, drag them to jail, and put them in jail, lock them up, where they can meet drug dealers, and they can broaden their horizons as far as their suppliers. You don't keep them in jail is ineffective, period. And the last time I checked, and this number may not be correct, but around 46% of the people that are incarcerated are in there are nonviolent offenders. So in other words, let's say there's 46% nonviolent offenders. Probably half of those are in there, or a lot of them are in there for pretrial. Whereas they're in there because they just can't make bond. Their bond may only be $100. They don't come from an affluent family or anybody that would have $100 or $5,000 in an attorney. So they sit there. They sit there and they wait out their time. Now, a lot of these individuals that are driving down the road and get arrested for a dime bag of weed, they may have had a job working for a company, and they have a wife and kids at home. As soon as they're picked up for that dime bag of weed and go to jail, they lose their job.
Oh, yeah.
Their wife and their kids have no income. Then they get food stamps, they get WIC, they have to move to public housing. So then they become dependent upon our tax dollars. Whereas if this man wouldn't have stayed in jail for a dime bag of weed, he'd be earning to live and support his family, and then it changes the amount of tax dollars they're spending on the family that needs to be in the family. And it doesn't take this, I'm using the father, it doesn't take this father away from his children. I mean, it's just a trickle effect.
So now here's, going back, I'm not as pessimistic as Calvin, but here's where Calvin's point does come into play. So what you're saying is, if you're elected, you are willing to battle the private sector interests that create the dynamic for those entities that you just talked about, for those entities to need to be housed. Because, I hear the point that a lot of people make, and I've even heard entities say, oh, we need to get rid of release people who are nonviolent offenders. But that goes against the grain as it relates to private corporations that are making money off of them being housed for food, for toiletries, for, I have a young guy, similar to what you said, the reason I'm even in Shreveport is because this young guy actually murdered somebody back in 1995, and I was on my way back to Atlanta. He has to go to do life in Angola. Just out the blue, about 3 years ago, a guy comes up to me at the fairgrounds and says, man, you do a good job in the city. So I said, okay. He stays there, and he said, you don't know me, do you? I was like, no. And it's this guy, his big brother to him, one in Queensboro, named Grover Arnold. So he got his charge reduced from murder to manslaughter. So he gets out immediately. So now he's in college working. Some kind of way, just a few streets down, about a month and a half ago, there was a shooting. Just somebody was shooting there. It was a gang fight or something. And he was walking down the street. He's arrested. He's in college at LSU, working. And exactly what you just said is happening. He hasn't even gone to trial yet. He's been in jail for over a month. He's had to drop out of school. And I got to go see him today at CCC, as a matter of fact. But the housing, guess what? Medication, because he has some health conditions. So now the state has to take care of that. I mean, the taxpayers have to actually take care of that. And so there's nothing actually that can be done. He hasn't even had an arraignment yet. He's been in jail for over a month now. And so I hear people say they're willing to engage the private sector enterprises that's making money off phone calls. In order to put even money on the books, you got to pay $5. There's a fee. There's a fee to put money on the books. So this is where I wrote with Calvin. This is a diabolical system, and I know that you probably have never researched or read this book called Slavery by Another Name. It's a white guy that wrote this book. I suggest that you, if not read the book, go on YouTube. They have the video. It's an hour and 45 minutes long. And the New Jersey Film Commission commissioned this guy to do this documentary. Because what happened, and this is what black folks don't understand, we were commodities doing chattel slavery. So the big thing was labor. Right before the end of the Civil War, the powers that be that control this game came up with a concept to make sure that they could continue the labor game, free labor game. So they came up with this thing called the convict leasing program. And this is something that you really need to check out because this dealt with the Sheriff's Department. Because the Sheriff's Department was the premier law enforcement entity in America at that time. The titans of the cotton and tobacco and sugarcane industry say, okay, we're going to shift our focus. So now, how do we get free labor? We got to set the laws up to now make sure that, if you're standing up, if you are whatever, we got to set the laws up where it's now a crime. Now we get the sheriff to arrest the people. So now, we now go to the sheriff, pay the sheriff to now lease, allow them to be leased to us for free labor. So this is just the extension, like the $500 bag thing. This is just the extension of what we're dealing with. And most of these people have no understanding as to how this works.
And it's not just free labor. They're actually, when on the work release program, when they go out, I know this is where you're going. You're 100% correct, and I am familiar with that. And I am familiar with the fact that when you bring these inmates out to work for this contract or whatever, then this contractor is going to pay the money to the sheriff's office, and that inmate gets maybe 10%.
There you go.
And so if our tax dollars are paying for those inmates to be housed and fed and everything else, then where is this other money going? I'm with you 100%.
It is a gangster. This game is, I have a cousin who is in federal prison in Beaumont. He don't never ask me for money now. And I'm glad that he doesn't. And he doesn't ask me for money because he has a job in jail. They're making uniforms. He makes about $7 an hour. But it replaces a $50,000 job in the free world. So now corrections have figured out, instead of shipping jobs overseas, let's take advantage of this free labor. Who's paying for health care? Taxpayers. Who's paying for rent? Taxpayers. So all we gotta do is get them to produce goods. Some of these prisoners are making customer service calls for corporations. So this is the game. So they're making money double time. The sheriff, all this is a hustle. So what I'm hearing you say, you're willing to engage these people in battle.
And this is what's creating this diversity in the community. This is part of it. This is the
Well,
stigma.
Ferguson was a good example of that. The whole system in Ferguson was based on arresting people for minor offenses, charging them and then giving tickets and all this other stuff to support the system in Ferguson. And when they're arrested, if you're not a criminal when you go in as a young person, the institution's going to make a criminal out of you. You will come out of there paranoid. You will come out of there not trusting nobody. You're going to come out of there. If you didn't know how to be a crook when you went in, you weren't down to what you want.
You're exactly. I hear that every single day. You are absolutely correct.
And so, Brother me, most people never come in contact with sheriff deputies. So that's why John was asking a question about the police issue. If Eric wins this position, his primary deal is covering that jail and seeing whether or not some of these guys, and I know Reverend Mays and possibly my sister Irma, we are directly connected to the reentry program. I've done probably about 10 workshops in there. I've probably been the highest speaker on the circuit, but it drains me. And they bring me inside of the jail as well as the reentry program. But the reality of the situation, most of the people that are there, they don't even have a concept of how they even got, they don't even understand that this has been systematically, worked out. I'm talking about white folks and black folks.
They give up. I mean, they just give up.
And so the recidivism rate continues. So I understand that most of them will only be able to be employed if they become entrepreneurs or one of the more industrious-minded guys becomes an entrepreneur and hires them. But none of this is basically being worked out. And so now we have a constant thing where now the black community is like, all the law enforcement treats us bad, but there's certain accountability and responsibility that we got to deal with as well. Because, brother, if you're not wearing your seatbelt and somebody pulls you over and now you don't have insurance, you're going to go to jail. Or you're going to get summons. But now if you don't go to court, now a warrant is going to be issued for you. People are getting arrested for these types of stupid things.
Big business and it's an injustice to society.
So I hope that when you are elected, that you will take a proactive step as it relates to being more connected. Because this is a human rights issue that most of these people don't even know how this thing even plays out.
And that's educating the public is where we start. I agree.
All right.
And that needs to happen.
Any other questions for Eric? Quick, and then we'll come back to you.
How much are cigarettes costing at CC?
I've never smoked, so I don't even know what a pack of cigarette costs anywhere. But I sure know what there. What? $7 for a pack of cigarettes?
Somebody told me it was 10. Between 10 to 15.
So they're making money on.
Yeah.
I was just trying to
I didn't know
find
that.
out if it were true or not.
It's us.
What happened to those 331 people that bought badges and the sheriff is selling?
Still selling, so they're still advertising.
So that's okay.
Well, not in my book, it's not okay. I think that, so there was just, in the last little campaign fundraiser ad, said you can give $200 a person or you can pay $500 and join the Caddo Club. The Caddo Club gets you a badge, a commission, a wallet, a license plate that says Caddo Club in front of it, and a sticker that identifies you as a $500 contributor. In other words, if you're going to get stopped, you see they're a $500 contributor, then that's a good way to raise a bunch of campaign money. I mean, hey, if I could sell badges, I mean, if that was ethical and legal, then I guess everybody would be doing it. I wouldn't, but.
Last question.
No, and sorry, and that's it. You can, it is at the sheriff's discretion. If he wants to give out honorary commissions and honorary badges and honorary commissions, you can give those out all you want. I disagree with the fact that you sell them. I disagree with the fact that the sheriff's office can pay for all these badges and commissions, and then the actual sheriff can take all the money and put it into his campaign account. I mean, that's an easy way. You can raise a lot of money quick doing that, and it's taxpayer money.
The Department of Corrections, it's almost like how Booker T. Washington's school used to teach trades and skills to students that had no intentions or no way of going to college. It used to be, like in California, I don't know about here in Louisiana, in California, the Department of Corrections had systems where you taught skills while you were doing time. They had counseling programs. So when an inmate was released, he was released with some kind of skill, or some kind of marketable trade he could use. And I understand most of the states and even the federal government is in financial situations where they can't support these programs. When you leave school, there's no jobs. And you're coming out with a diploma, or even without a diploma, but you don't have a skill. And it sets a cycle where you go from school to prison. And to me, it's defeating the purpose of rehabilitation. And you mentioned about drugs. It's just like marijuana is like a habit of smoking cigarettes. It's not an addiction. It's something you want to do because it makes you feel a certain way.
That's right, I agree.
And when a person gets busted for having a roach, it's like, I don't know, last year sometime, you arrested some guy and they took him, they give you a skin search and check you out and everything. And instead of him putting this marijuana roach in his mouth to hide him sneaking inside and not getting detected with it, he put it in his rectum. They made a big joke about it. When they did the skin search, they had him bent over and they found a roach in his behind. They made a big laugh about it in the newspapers and, But to me, these things are like social habits and not addictions.
Well, I agree with
and
that.
people are getting busted for these things, Some people try marijuana and they say, I don't like the way it makes me feel. So they give it up, even smoking cigarettes. But they criminalize a person to where you get busted for certain things, like having a marijuana, get busted for marijuana or something like that. It stopped you. And like I said, like in California, I've done time in reform school and prison there back in the 50s and 60s. And they had programs inside. They had a program called an ICE program. And that ICE stood for Intensive Correctional Efficiency, where you had, every day after lunch, you had to spend at least an hour and a half in these group counseling sessions where you express yourself. You couldn't just sit there as a not on the law. You had to participate in order to be successful in this program. I don't know if Louisiana have this, but you are running for election position. You have to stay in contact with the grassroots because this is where the problem is.
That's why I'm here. I agree with that.
You have to stay in contact with the grassroots.
I can't go out every day and talk to big businesses because there's a different agenda.
Yes.
So I realize that.
And Eric, as we close out on that note, and right over me talking about 50s and 60s when he was in reform school and prison, we were in an industrial age at that time. So it behooved entities to now want people to produce things. We're now in information technology age. So those entities, they don't need to reform them or give them skill. They need them to be in jail so that they can now become commodities. Capitalism is predicated on a permanent underclass. It's just the bottom line. Let's thank Brother Eric for coming out. Have you gone to the campaign election yet, or when will you be bringing that out?
In the next week.
Okay, cool. Let's get some of that.
Thank you all very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Next week we'll have Mark Sweeney from the MPC, the new director for the MPC, to kind of talk about critical